The NFL offseason isn't here just yet, but all eyes are on former Louisville Cardinals star Lamar Jackson. Joining me today, Tony Wiggins, host of Locked On Jaguars and one of the hosts of Locked On NFL. Tony, how's it going, man?
Good, man. How you doing, Dalton? Nice to see you again.
Yeah, man, doing pretty well. We for those who don't remember, had Tony on the show. What was it? Almost like a year ago,
Just
talking
about,
about
right?
Lamar Jackson, Devontae Parker, Teddy Bridgewater, a lot of former Cardinals in the league. But figured I'd bring him back onto the show to talk Lamar Jackson, where all of the eyes are on the former Cardinal quarterback. Before we get into the show, I want to say thank you all again for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the Locked On Louisville, Locked On Jaguars, and Locked On NFL shows are all free on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your teams every day. Lamar Jackson will break it down, talking about the plausibility that he's back in Baltimore long term. We'll then dive into what Baltimore would need to do then to try to get over the hump into being a Super Bowl contender, or getting over the hump and being in the mix for a Super Bowl. And then finally, unfortunately, Tony won't be able to join us for this one. He has to go in about 20 minutes or so, but we'll talk about some possible trade destinations should Jackson not be in the cards for Baltimore long term. Tony, right away, obviously, news has been kind of flustering, whether or not, whether he was healthy for that final game, whether he wasn't. I will say, as a Louisville fan, he's been a guy who's poured his heart and soul into this university, so only good things to say about him on my end. Playing hurt, playing in the bowl game when he didn't need to. Regardless, do you think Lamar's going to be back in Baltimore for, past this next season if they were to franchise tag him?
Had you asked me that question 8 weeks ago, I'd have said, of course he's going to be back. You don't let guys like that go. But now, looking at it, I'm thinking they're trying to position themselves to move on. And I don't think it's because they don't think he can play or they don't think he's great. I just think that they have, you stay in a poker game too long.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody raises, but you sit there and now you see something that you shouldn't have saw, but now you think that bad hand is a good hand, and you stay there and you start betting and you lose money. I think what they did was they saw the next card, and the next card is a bounty of draft picks that they'll get, that they were actually able to win some without him. Not to the degree, I think they beat Cincinnati if he plays. I agree with the running back up in Baltimore. The thing is though, they've started to imagine, okay, where if we send him somewhere, what are we getting back? We're getting probably 4 draft picks and 2 players, one a starter and somebody else who's a situational player that we can develop. And I think they're going like, no one has ever given us that much ammunition. And we've done a lot by picking. Baltimore's always in the playoffs, so they're always picking towards the middle or the end. And we've been able to do a lot and be really, really consistent for 20 years. What if somebody gave us all of that stuff like that Detroit got for Matthew Stafford? What could we do with that? So I think the probability or the likelihood that they'll start exploring what could be, I really believe that that's going to be the poison that allows them to trade him away. And I ultimately believe that it'll be a mistake.
I think I'm with you in the sense that halfway through the season, it seemed like it was going to be a done deal. And who knows, maybe they could have agreed to a contract extension before the end of the season, kind of how the Ravens were, even though they were losing close games, it was pretty obvious that Lamar Jackson was the guy. And, we've talked about him, 26 years old now, former unanimous MVP of the league. Sure, he's had some injury issues over the past 2 years, but nonetheless, when he's on the field, he's money. And let's hope that those injury issues don't become a recurring issue. But comes out that Baltimore had offered Lamar previous extensions, sort of in the area of like 115 guaranteed. They upped that offer about 20 more million. Like they say, times are a-changing, and the era of guaranteed money has hit the National Football League, beginning with contracts like players to Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, all making north of $150 million total guaranteed. That's not even the total amount, but guaranteed alone. If you're Lamar, you kind of have to look at that and be like, no, definitely not. Is he going to get the contract that you think he's looking to get? I would assume he's looking for top 5 guaranteed money. But do you think he's ultimately going to get that, whether that be from Baltimore or someone else in the league?
I'm glad you put that caveat on the end. Yes, I do think he's going to get it. Where he gets it from, I don't know. But yeah, he's going to get the money. And for a guy that's 25, 26 years old, that has picked 29th in the draft, has won an MVP, exceeded all expectations. I mean, really has exceeded those expectations. Bet on himself and gambled on himself, and guess what? He won. Then he got hurt. The team went on a little bit of a run, but it wasn't good enough. And the areas where they were deficient, if they'd have had him, they would have won the game, showed up. So the scenario played out for him perfectly, even though I'm sure he wanted to be with his teammates, but I wouldn't have risked further injury either, especially from someone that is $135 million is a lot of money to anybody. But,
of course,
but Lamar has an obligation, and people don't really get this. The reason why Lamar Jackson can even get offered $135 million guaranteed is because somebody before him that might have not have deserved it, could have been Dak Prescott, got a whole bunch of money because it was their time. So what folks don't understand is he's not being greedy. What he's doing is, you're in a fraternity called the NFLPA, right? It's a union, but players, they respect each other. A different way, it's like any fraternity. Like, I'm a veteran. There's a certain rapport I have with them. I have another fraternity. There's a rapport I have with them. And then I got the one about the guys I grew up in the neighborhood with, right? So they're all different, but there's a certain loyalty that you have to them. And the bottom line is, he would have to actually choose to cut everybody else's water off. And what I mean is, if he takes less, that's not just about him in Baltimore. That's about him and the next guy and the next guy and the next guy. And
that sets a precedent.
Right. And the guys previous to him or prior to him, they set it up for him to drink out of this fountain. You don't drink your water and then turn the faucet off for the guy. You just don't do it. You don't even get $135 million offered to you if it wasn't for the people who came before you. You have an obligation to keep it moving. It's not up to you to make a decision to change that, especially when your career suggests that you're supposed to get, you're next up. It's your turn. And the NFL knows this better than anybody. And they have given money away to other people over the years. He shouldn't make one sacrifice, and he ought to get everything that he's supposed to get at this point.
This whole greedy, narrative, it's completely misled. It's misguided. It's, why would you ever settle, like you said, why would you ever settle for less than you're worth? I mean, we just seen Deshaun Watson get $230 million guaranteed, and you're
after his problems.
Exactly. After. And you're supposed to look at Lamar Jackson, who has been a model citizen. Now throw, the problems to the side for a second, and just from a football field, even with the problems considered, Lamar Jackson, in my opinion, better than Deshaun Watson on the field. You can argue that here and there, but regardless, it's very comparable, to say the least. You're trying to tell me that he's worth $100 less million in guaranteed money than Deshaun Watson? There's no chance.
Right. Even if you take the problems away, I'll probably have them a little bit more even than you do, because I thought that after those first couple of guys, that Watson, when he was in Houston, was right there, right? I mean, he had this Joe Montana thing about him, and he was extremely accurate, and he was real even-keeled, and you never had questions about whether or not he could throw the ball into certain windows and all of that stuff.
Sure.
But Lamar's Lamar, and he brings a totally different package. And you're right. I can't leave the character stuff out, because the bottom line is, even after that, he got $230 million guaranteed.
Exactly.
That's double the 115. There's no way in the world you're going to tell me that that's fair.
Yeah.
And it's not. And I know Baltimore has won a lot in the past. It's not their first rodeo. Joe Flacco, they offered him 75. He said, no, I'm going to go bet on myself. He wins the MVP of the Super Bowl. He gets 125. They understand. Trust me, they wanted him to take that deal. They did not want him to do what he did this year and prove that he deserved that money.
Oh, I definitely agree. One question before we head into the next segment, but it is crazy that you mentioned me. Now, granted, for a lot of NFL front offices, that Deshaun Watson contract, even considering the character stuff and the stuff off the field, that had to be a nightmare contract for front offices across the league because of that precedent. It said it like, oh, well, now you're looking at guys like Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, so far down the list, Lamar Jackson, these younger quarterbacks that are in line for contract extensions coming up. Now you're definitely in a different price range. I want to ask you this before we get into the next segment. Assuming that they're going to franchise tag Lamar Jackson, which you would probably assume that they do unless they trade him before that. March 7th is the deadline, $45 million cap hit. Do you assume that Lamar Jackson plays on that franchise tag, or does he try to force Baltimore's hand by holding out?
If the cap hit is $45 million, they can't do that. That's like 1/5 of the cap, and that's one person.
Yeah.
And people know that. It's a couple of times they get you. When they know you don't want to leave the cap number, because you can negotiate. If they give him $200 million guaranteed, his cap number ain't going to be nowhere near $45 million. It's probably going to be around $22 million, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. They know you don't want him to accept and play with him under that cap. The other time they get you is when you have this balloon payment at the end of your contract. Like, they put all this front-loaded money, and then what they did was, for these teams, when there's 1 year left on the guy's deal that was a 5-year, $150 million deal, well, the last year's like $50 million, right? And they know you don't want to play for that number, so they try to renegotiate with you, and you have the leverage. But one thing I'll backtrack on a little bit, and when we talk about the money that Deshaun Watson got, I don't think it turned the league upside down.
You don't think so?
No, because I think that there was a line longer than the line was at that restaurant when they were selling those chicken sandwiches about a year and a half ago, of teams that would have given Houston everything that Cleveland gave him, knowing they had to pay him. We hear the stories that there were a dozen teams that would have taken him regardless. So I don't want to let the hypocrisy in the NFL interfere with our thinking. They know it's 12 people get mad at Cleveland. There were 12 other people.
They were just one of the teams in line that was going to pay.
They were the one that had happened, but there was a bunch of other people that would have done it.
Right. I can see that for sure. I want to now kind of transition into assuming, let's say theoretically, that Baltimore does come to an agreement with Lamar Jackson for the long term to stay with the Ravens. What do the Ravens need to do to get over that hump and win a Super Bowl? We'll do that here in just a second after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sports book in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. If you sign up today at FanDuel.com/LockedOn, place a measly $5 bet, you can get $150 in free bets guaranteed. It is an opportunity like no other. Go check out all of the props on the AFC and NFC Conference Championship games this weekend. You won't regret it. So football fans, don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Tony Wiggins, host of Locked On Jaguars and one of the hosts of Locked On NFL, joining me today to talk about Lamar Jackson and his future. Let's assume theoretically, Tony, that he's back with the Ravens long term. Obviously, this was a team that with Tyler Huntley almost went up to Cincinnati and defeated the Bengals, who might necessarily be the favorite to possibly win the Super Bowl. Who knows? Roquan Smith, 5-year extension worth $100 million total. So you get two players on both sides of the ball back. What else does Baltimore need to do now that, Greg Roman is now gone? They're looking for an offensive coordinator. What do the Ravens need to do as an organization to get over that hump and to beat Kansas City, Buffalo, Cincinnati, and win the Super Bowl?
Stay healthy. I think that they've just had, whether it's Rashad Bateman last year and this year, Ronnie Stanley, whoever it's been, they've had some health issues. It was J.K. Dobbins before. They were just banged up. They were banged up coming into the game against Cincinnati. They have never really had their complete team on the field. They've added some receivers. They could probably add one more maybe. they have enough tight ends. It seems like they never run out of tight ends. They never run out of offensive linemen. Sometimes what happens is on defense, though, they have so much attrition because it seems like they're the farm system for the 6'5", 255-pound edge rusher, like that hybrid dude. How many guys around the league when Zadarius Smith, you go through the league and there's always this big tweener who was in Baltimore who played well. There's one in New England right now named Matt Judon. These dudes just get bred there, and they can't pay them all. And they know that they have an eye for it because that's how they're built. They can always go find the next guy who can do that. So I think what they have to do is they have to hit that magic hot spot where they, one, get healthy all at the same time, and then two, make it a year prior to guys' contracts expiring that they don't have to pay everybody. Usually when teams win it all, they win it all with, I hate to say it like this, but cheap players. Players on their first contracts, players on do it, prove it deals, guys on, who are rookies. You have to be lucky because once you win it, now everybody carries that Super Bowl trophy and that pedigree around as if it's a bonus on your contract.
And very seldom do Super Bowl windows stay open because of that. And that's why people prioritize that rookie contract for the quarterback, at least. Now, granted, you're going to have your outliers like Kansas City and what they're able to do with Patrick Mahomes and, New England with Brady, so on and so forth. One thing that I really don't have any doubt in Baltimore is that they draft very, very well. Mm-hmm. They get a ton of value, not only in the first round because they draft well in the first round, but in the later rounds as well. And they fill out those depth issues. And it's crazy to see Baltimore still kind of right there in the picture despite having all these issues health-wise. I think a lot of that can be contributed to those depth additions in the draft, things of that nature. A new offensive coordinator will be coming to town. We'll see. I think that Harbaugh has a little bit more of a hand in the offense than people want to think he does. But regardless, there's the narrative about the receiving corps. Obviously, they've done him no favors in that regard. Do they need to go out and really revamp that receiving corps for Baltimore to reach that full potential? I know they have a very interesting offensive identity, but it could be set to change here with a new offensive coordinator coming in.
I think a lot of blame for their receiving corps goes to the personnel department unjustly. I also think it went to Lamar Jackson because they said he wasn't a pure passer unjustly. I think the problem with their offense is gone. I'm not a big Greg Roman fan.
Nor am I.
And I may be in the minority with that. But I am a firm believer that if they go up to Philly and interview Brian Johnson, who's the quarterback's coach, you see what he did with Jalen Hurts, right? All of the questions that they had about Jalen Hurts are the same ones they had about Lamar Jackson, but they had more questions about Jalen Hurts because he's not fast, as fast as Lamar, and he's not as mercurial of an athlete as Lamar. I do believe that if they get someone like that understands the quarterback position, who also knows how to call plays, they can get Pep Hamilton, someone who really knows how to dial things up. Pep Hamilton got fired. Make Pep Hamilton the quarterback coach like he was with Justin Herbert, and make Brian Johnson the offensive coordinator.
I'm a Chargers fan, Tony. I want Pep back.
You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. So
trust me, we had Joe Lombardi for the past couple of seasons. I definitely know what you're talking about.
So what happens is once you galvanize that and get that room right and insulate him properly, then I think the fact that he's probably going to start running less because he's getting banged up, I think it opens the door for him to be a better passer. I think it opens the door for the offense to thrive more. It's okay to have an identity, but you have to toe the line between having an identity and being predictable. And what happens is when you have a problem trying to find what that line is, injuries don't help because now it shrinks up the possibilities that you have on offense. So I really think the best days of Lamar Jackson are ahead of him. I think he's going to prove a bunch of people wrong because I think he can throw it.
Another thing that Philadelphia did is they banked on Jalen Hurts' development, but they also said, we're going to get you some solid weapons on the outside. They went out and they traded for A.J. Brown, and we've seen how he's been able to take this offense to a new level. They, in the draft, went out and drafted Devontae Smith in the first round. Shored up that offensive line, continue to create that stronghold up front that Baltimore has done a very good job with as well. But I think you're right. I think that the brightest days for Lamar Jackson are ahead of us, and we'll see whether that's in Baltimore or whether that could be somewhere else. Tony, I know you have to go.
I'll leave you with this, though. The danger in looking at them and comparing Philadelphia is it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Remember, the Eagles at one point had 3 first-round picks because of the Carson Wentz deal, right? Mm-hmm. So they saw what Philly did with all of those picks, which they traded one of them for A.J. Brown, right? Mm-hmm. And they paid him. And then they took, the year before, they took the receiver. They turned those picks into a bounty of really, really good players. So Baltimore may be looking at the Philly situation, and as opposed to looking at Philly adding these pieces to Jalen Hurts, they may look at that and go, look what they did, because Jalen Hurts was a nobody when they did that. And then they got all of these draft picks. They developed their own quarterback, and then they surrounded him with all of this stuff. So
sure,
I think what they need to do is pay him. Having a quarterback on the roster allows you so much flexibility, especially for a team that has done really well. Look back through history. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th round and the 6th round, Baltimore has eaten the draft alive. When you can do that, you don't need a bunch of first-round picks and high picks to be good. You are the farm system for the league, and I think that they just need to pay their guy, have that secure blanket up under the blanket, have him that player in your repertoire, and then build out from there.
I definitely agree. Tony, appreciate you as always for jumping on. I know you got to go. Only thing I'm not a big fan of Tony is that his Jaguars took care of my Chargers in historic fashion. We won't talk about that.
I got another reason why you ain't a big fan. Go Noles, baby. I am a Seminole to my heart, man. I know, but let me.
It's the last time.
No. But look, y'all got Jeff Brown. And you got a real good recruiting staff. There's a couple of guys I know on staff. Jeff Brown is going to produce NFL quarterbacks and wide receivers from here on out. Trust me.
Definitely appreciate that. It's Tony Wiggins, host of Locked On Jaguars, and one of the hosts of Locked On NFL. Give him a follow in his Twitter bio below, or Twitter handle below. But Tony, appreciate you having me on. Appreciate having you on, and we'll see you here soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, man. That's not me. I'm not James. I am Dalton, but want to give a shout out once again to Tony. He had to hop off, but very appreciative. Heading into the final segment, Lamar Jackson, if he were not to end up with the Baltimore Ravens long term, who are some possible trade partners? Well, obviously, you have to look at who could throw together a package. Tony mentioned it's probably going to be comprised of multiple draft picks, multiple first-round draft picks, maybe even some young players. I'm not here to talk about the plausibility of a certain team trading for Lamar, or at least not right now. But I want to talk about some of the best fits regardless of trade package. Number one, I think that there's 3 teams in my opinion. Both teams from New York and the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins, for obvious reasons, you have to seriously question, the long-term health of Tua Tagovailoa. And there was questions towards the end of the season of whether or not, he could take this offense to the next level. Lamar Jackson with a receiving committee of Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, a solid offensive play caller in Mike McDaniel. I think that really, in all honesty, this will probably be the best fit for Lamar because it takes a playoff contender to a true Super Bowl favorite. Because, maybe looking at they might have to give away more players because they don't have a first-round pick this year. Still, they're probably keeping Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, so you have solid pieces on that offense. Defensively, they're respectable, but you have a solid play caller in Mike McDaniel. You have a solid receiving core and supporting cast surrounding Lamar in Miami from the South Florida area, so that makes a ton of sense. So Miami, it would probably be the place that you would look at and think, well, it makes a ton of sense. I'm not saying that they're ready to move on from Tua Tagovailoa. They may view him as the guy that can take them to the next level and compete for Super Bowls. That is a very valid point of view. But I'm saying that if they were to look to, maybe go after a Lamar Jackson, that would make a ton of sense as well. I think that both New York teams make a ton of sense. New York Jets are my 1A to 1B with Miami as opposed to, or as for being the best fit for Lamar Jackson because of the roster that they have in place. They have a defensive-minded coach. and Robert Saleh. So they have a solid defense. Sauce Gardner, Quentin Williams. There's a lot of talent on that defense. Offensively speaking, you've got Breece Hall. You've got a solid young receiving core, Garrett Wilson, so on and so forth. There is a lot of talent on this team, solid offensive line play. It depends on who Baltimore would want in return. You could think that they may, take a handful of draft picks. I don't necessarily think they would go after Zach Wilson, but who knows? Maybe Mike White is included in that. But you look at now, Nathaniel Hackett is the new offensive coordinator in New York. Whether or not that was the right move or not is yet to be seen. He didn't pan out in Denver as the head coach. But regardless, I think that the Jets make a lot of sense because they have a young roster around him. They have cap space to really make some moves. Defensively, very, very solid team. They're really just missing that dynamic quarterback that can take them to the next level. And we saw this team really flirt with playoff contention, with a rotating quarterback carousel of Joe Flacco, Mike White, and Zach Wilson. Imagine inserting Lamar Jackson into the mix. And don't forget, Breece Hall also missed a good amount of the season with a season-ending injury. So the Jets make a ton of sense. The Giants, in my opinion, as well. Now, granted, they got to the playoffs with Daniel Jones. But I think that the opening loss to the Philadelphia Eagles in the divisional round makes you or leads you to believe that, New York still can get better. Whether or not Daniel is the quarterback of the future is to be seen, but I would be ecstatic to see what Brian Daboll could do with a player like Lamar Jackson. Obviously, you have to see what they're going to do with Saquon Barkley, but they have a solid defense to pair with that, and it's kind of like Baltimore. You have an offense with potential, but you have a good defense to help propel that offense into solid situations. I think that Miami makes the most sense along with the New York Jets. The Giants are right there as well, strictly because of what Brian Daboll was able to do in year one with the New York Football Giants with Daniel Jones as his quarterback. Now, granted, I am not saying that Daniel Jones is a scrub by any means, but Lamar Jackson is better than Daniel Jones. So I think that, you could take that offense to new heights. And obviously, Brian Daboll, a mastermind with Josh Allen in Buffalo, really knows how to utilize the mobility of his starting quarterback. We saw that with Allen, and you would definitely assume that he would be able to do just that and more with Lamar Jackson, who is the best dual threat quarterback in the National Football League. So a lot of moving parts here. Tony and I talked about the plausibility that he stays in Baltimore long term. Even though, he's got a say in who the offensive coordinator is going to be, it's going to come down to the money aspect of things, as it should. Lamar has earned that right to go out and secure his bag and, get an opportunity for himself to have the best contract that he can get. We talked about what Baltimore would need to do: stay healthy, revamp the offense in terms of play calling, continue to surround himself or even, surround him with better players on the outside in the receiver positions. Talked about some of the possible best trade destinations. Miami, New York Jets, New York Giants, in my opinion, are the three best spots that Lamar could realistically end up at for teams that are in the market for a starting quarterback or would be involved in the Lamar Jackson sweepstakes. But we'll see how things go. March 7th is the deadline for a franchise tag. Assuming that the Ravens do franchise tag Lamar, it would be a $45.2 million deal for 1 year, and then he would be an unrestricted free agent after that season. But regardless, we will see what happens. But that's going to wrap up this Friday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here very soon.